It couldn't have timed better for me. Exactly what I spoke about, why I do this, the way I do this, because that disturbs me. And I could not replicate that if I'd have seen it at home. Now I use that word, and now people are thinking, oh God, he doesn't like it. Does it matter? The way that that's been presented and the subject matter speaks to me. The fact that it's disturbing works, it's got a message across. Now, whether that's from somebody's realness from within inside, whether it's a model, makes no difference. It really speaks volumes to me about the way that it's been portrayed and set up. It's even to the point that none of it's particularly sharp. And I think if it was, it wouldn't have the same effect. Now, it may be that it was sharp and you've done some post-processing, put a bit of noise and grain. It doesn't really matter how it's got there. There's something about that just sort of speaks some volumes to me. Okay, next one. No, I'm going to score them at the end.
Okay.
No, we're going to go through all of them and then I'll score at the end. Interesting title for me in a way. 2 years ago, Sandra and I moved up here, and on some of the weekends we were coming up to find premises. We stopped off at Morecambe Bay, but it was February and it was cold and it was raining. It did not represent this, but we still chose to come and live up in the north and Cumbria, so it didn't affect us that badly.
That's the 3 good days a year we get.
It's not always grim or not.
Are they all in the same? Are they in the same year though? Do you think, or are they across the separate? Yeah, I think it creates a lovely little storyline. And while there's images and panels, what you don't want in these sort of these sets is you don't want to have any particularly standout wow images or any images. They all need to be of a similar sort of standard. I think that one's quite soft compared to the other two, so it just makes it a little weaker. But the storyline I enjoy and love, because this is giving me an early morning feel. That's obviously an end of day. But then this middle one, using the sort of, I suppose, the S and serpentine and the way the water's running through the bay, it completes a story for me. So while you'll never sort of, as a triptych, go, yeah, that's a really poor image, the whole thing's going to pour scorely. That's not what I'm saying. It's about trying to get a balance between the image's quality, but the story still works regardless of that. It's just pointing something out. The other thing I would say is as well, my comments are only my opinions. It does mean I am wrong when I leave the building. I accept that. You'll all say something different. And I know you do a choice afterwards, don't you? So, yeah, keep going. It took me a while to understand from your website and your rules what it meant by that when you composite together, the fourth bit mustn't represent another image. And I'm thinking, what on earth did that mean? And now I get it, because somebody might have made that another image, and that's where it comes from. So it made sense to me now. I was struggling with that to start with. The other thing that surprised me as well is the way some of these triptychs are set out. Triptychs, normally you always think of them as being 3 in a line. So again, the way that they've all been set out changes things, how you look at them and how they work. I like the way these have been staggered coming down and through. Again, similar sort of thing to the previous one. It's about using the different times of day through this. There's a sense of early morning, again later, and then again darker in the evening still. That particular one I think has been really well handled with the lighting conditions. You know, yeah, most judges, if you did it as an individual, are going to tell you that's all white and burnt out and no detail. But it's about the mood and atmosphere it creates. And I think, again, it's another one that creates a lovely little story. And that's the hardest bit about this, is it's making the connection between the images that kind of give you a clue as to what's going on and how this is working. So again, another one that's giving the story. Okay. The poor old kingfisher's getting a lot of bad rep at the moment, isn't it, with the nature photography and diving into tanks and the set-up shots, but you've still got to go and take the pictures and you've still got to deal with them. Again, I like the idea of the way that this has worked. Some of the other wildlife ones I don't think quite tell the same story as how this one's working. Obviously the top one's giving us that, waiting to go and do its catch, find what it's looking for. The middle one is obviously capturing the fish, and I'd like to bet you probably spent ages trying to get that middle image because it was never going to be in the right place. It didn't have the fish, all those sorts of bits. And then obviously the flying away off to the perch afterwards. I think, again, it's giving that story of exactly what a kingfisher is doing and about its fishing and about the way it works. The hardest thing for that type of image is obviously it's about your backgrounds and making sure that they're all sort of diffused. If there was one in there that sort of had a bit more detail and wasn't diffused, it would stand out and not quite fit the same way. But I think the fact that you've got the backgrounds, I know that one's slightly different out in colour, but I think that helps and concentrates us on the birds themselves. Okay. I think that was quite an obvious layout for how you were going to do that, you know, looking in from the edges to the one in the centre. And it was about choosing the right emotions to use for the images. I think the one in the centre kind of really works, doesn't it? Speaking of sort of joy and happiness. Whether I'd have flipped those two and then sadness one end, and personal preference, just the way I'm looking at it, that I think I don't know if I'd have started with the sadness. But again, personal preference. Really difficult subject, because obviously this is all sort of being lit by some stage lighting, I assume. It's creating quite some hard highlights for you to deal with. But I think, again, you've worked really, really well with that. I like the way that you've presented it as well within this just simple sort of border and split each image up, keeping it all a good balance. The fact the head heights are all similar. There might be some comments I make about one or two where they don't match. I think that also is just adds a little bit of symmetry to the whole thing. Okay. Again, another image for me that kind of went, yeah, okay, triptychs don't have to be three in a line and all that typical sort of thing. They can be done in different ways. And it's about then being able to use a portrait image in with two landscapes. You know, if you did that as a set of three as you'd normally see, that particular one would probably be standing out, wouldn't work the same way. So again, I think it's been well presented and put together to create that story. I like the fact that we've got this sort of big view of Conway from there, and then this lead in down at the bottom, giving us sort of two views of it from there. And then just the use again. We're using the boats as a leading line to the castle. I think it's connecting all three images really well. Okay. I know the challenges of this. I volunteered to be a photographer for a club in Chatham once who were playing in about the 8th tier of the English division, so they weren't the best club in the world. Their floodlights were awful, so once it got dark, you couldn't really take any pictures because it was horrid. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I was always at the wrong end. You know, my team, the team that I was meant to be photographing, weren't doing much attacking. They were doing a lot more defending. So I thought, oh, okay, now I'll go down and do that, and then they all went up the other end. So I was always unfortunate. again, whether these three are from exactly the same thing doesn't really matter. That could have been a cross from anything, could have been a goal from not necessarily the same cross. But it doesn't matter, it creates that lovely little story. Again, I actually like the way you've laid that one out, because for me it gives an indication of the way that the cross has come in and curled in. It kind of follows the sort of arc of what the ball would for me. So I think that works as well. That one, I think, again, while it's not about the individual images, the lighting I know is difficult, but if his face could have just been a little lighter and could have really seen the emotion on it, I think it'd have really connected much stronger than it does at the moment. But it isn't about the individual images, it's about the three. Again, I think they're working really well. Isn't it interesting as well? If that was in as an individual competition, first thing the judge is going to talk about is the men in the orange jackets and the yellow jackets, isn't it? They're distracting. I mean, it's part of the game, it's part of the sport. You can't really do a lot about it. Okay. Again, somebody's thought about how they wanted to present this and work with it. So we're obviously presented with the whole flower here, and then again, using this way of dealing differently with a triptych, and splitting it up to the inner parts from the main. Again, lovely story between what you're connecting between the different parts of it. These two particularly could have been really easy to have got them soft, not sharp, and then they wouldn't really have worked as a three because one's sort of dragging the others down. But those two are nice and strong with macro photography. So again, somebody's got showing skills of what they're doing with the imagery. Background's nicely muted for that, making it stand out. And then we're also sort of picking up some similar colours through it. So again, it's another one. It's really difficult when you do any set subjects, because it's about whether they're working as a story and whether what they're doing works. And it's another one that is kind of connecting with the story of the tulip. Okay. It took me a moment or two to kind of think, oh, hang on a minute, that's all three images put together. There wasn't a defining sort of line between them. And I kind of like the way that it now seems to be one image. So it's working in a different way than an obvious triptych would. There's that little bit down there, which is just, I think you've got to be careful about how you're working with your rules and whatever. But that bit kind of just doesn't fit in with what you've got in that part of it. But I think there's the three individuals at the top. I think that all works and connects as the three. Whether you could have done anything with the three individuals to have sort of dealt with the bottom bit, so when it comes together in the way that you've worked it, I'm not distracted by this bottom bit and wondering what's going on, because the connection is all about what's going on in that top section. Okay. Now, they're your rules. Does that constitute another part of the image? Don't know. That's up to you to decide at your own pace. Quite a clever image for me, because we don't quite realise how many cameras are around that are watching us anymore. And that's really interesting after you taking those three images, whether somebody come and tapped you on the shoulder to find out what you was actually doing and up to. But again, I think that's a lovely kind of connection with, you know, who's watching who. That's the kind of story I'm getting from that. Are they watching you, watching them, watching you? Or the other way around? Again, balance of the three, I think works. I like the way you sort of split them. Detail, sharpness, lighting, it's all sort of, you know, even and balanced, works well together. Okay. kind of get what you were trying to do with the rope and the pulleys, and I'm struggling with the sort of two rope ones, only because you've got these sort of strong horizontals coming in and then the abrupt vertical at the other end. Now, it might be exactly what you wanted to do, was create that abruptness and that stop and that sort of harshness to it at that point. But for me, I don't know if I wanted a different element to it at that end rather than just the two bits of rope. Because I think there is something there with the rope, the pulleys, and then potentially the third item could be whatever the rope and the pulleys are driving or running or dragging, and for me that would be the element I would want to see with it. So I'm not quite making the connection with how you want to work, particularly with that third image. Okay. Again, my thought process is, are you adding a fourth element into this with the way that you're doing the end images and creating that sort of shape to it? Particularly as the three sort of look a lot stronger as their individual elements. I actually think I know where this is, because I think I've taken the pictures myself. Is it at the town hall? Yeah. So first for me to recognise something in the north. All the other pictures I've seen, people go, oh, everybody knows where that is. We haven't got a clue. We've never seen it before. So it's actually a very natural story to tell, isn't it? Because all of the different bits around there's all different stories. So I think as a storytelling exercise, it works really well. I think the conversion to mono is an obvious choice for it, because it leads us more about the stories and what it's talking about. Okay. I think when you sort of first and second images, you kind of had an idea what the third was going to be. And I think it does make a good caption. It's not all one thing. I think the first two probably says more about you, that you were looking for something to eat or you were thirsty at the time of doing this project. But then we're fitting in something different with the modern. I don't mind that it's a rear view of those two people and we're not looking. It's about looking at what they're looking at. The same here, there's a sort of lovely little connection with the people. I think that's just, it says exactly what it is on the tin. You know, it's a street life view, and I think we've captured that through there. Okay. Again, it's the middle one for me that's not quite sitting. Completely understand what you've done, and it's the different elements that are making up the three sort of images. I like what we've done with the textures in this one and this one. I don't know if there was a different texture that could have been similar to that. But by the same token, it may well be absolutely deliberate. You wanted that kind of starkness in the centre compared to the sort of two softer bits on the outside. And when I say soft, I don't mean out of focus soft. I don't, not being nice judging. I mean just in the feeling of that they're a bit softer with that being a bit starker. Again, I think the conversion to mono is probably the stronger thing for it than necessarily the colour. But I do wonder whether some of this particular one here, whether it's just a bit bright and the monochrome conversion could have been a bit stronger with some of the blacks, and then it might have connected better with the center image. Okay. I was kind of thinking it's going to be connected to phones, and then nomophobia, I thought, I'm going to have to go and look that up and see if it's a real word, unless somebody's made it up. So I've got to do that myself now. Again, a different way of presenting with the two on the top, the one underneath. And again, you could have almost put this into street life as well. Now, how often can you be walking through a town centre and people are on phones that don't even look, and you bump into them because they're not watching where they're going. So again, I think it's a lovely capture of what's going on around us, a snap of everyday life. Again, the mono conversion, it's making us talk more into the story. We're not distracted by the colours in the background, so it probably works. I do think that that image probably really isn't strong enough to tell the story of what you're connecting with. They seem to be a bit distant. You can't really see any connection with the phone in the same way you do with these two. And that one does seem to be a bit softer than the other two. So it's kind of just pulling the other two down. Still tells the story, but I think it's just a bit weaker than the other two for that story. Okay. Again, a bit similar to the other Orkney textures, a very deliberate way of working with the different colours. I do like the way that you actually title the individual ones and then make a connection all through with the titles. So that is all about the colours. I kind of, for me, it's almost working, and I get where you're going with your turquoise, but I don't know if I want this bit in the image. And I know then you've got to start thinking about, well, if I crop that out, how do I deal with these ones? Do I crop them to make them the same size? Because I completely get the top bits with the colours and the sort of abstract nature that it's going. That to me takes some of the abstract nature away from it. Again, it's only my opinion, and I'm not saying it's what you should do. It's just how I'm viewing it and seeing that as a story. Okay. It's probably one of the most beautiful garden birds that you can get in the garden. We were quite fortunate at our previous property. We have about 10 or 15 of these coming into a bird feeder, and just beautiful colours. All three are captured well, and I'm just kind of wondering, what's the story? It's almost just three goldfinches, and that's almost seems to be what it is. And I'm not saying they're poor pictures. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not connecting with the story that you're trying to get through as an image, other than presenting me with three very good quality images of goldfinches. Okay. I was trying to find in that one, after I saw that one, I was trying to find the surfer. And I'm not sure if that person might be related to. Because the first one, again, it's one of those things, when you see them as three individuals, you're wondering what the next one's going to be, and so on and so forth. So when I saw that one and the surfer and that one and the surfer, I kind of thought, where was the surfer in the first one? Because then I'm getting the whole story that, early morning, out surfing, middle of the day, and then finish at the end of the day. That's the story I'm getting through from that. Whether that's the story that you wanted to portray, but that's what I'm reading from that, and I think it works really well. I like the way it's also layered landscape top to bottom as well. Okay. So here's a difficult one. It's definitely a story. There's more than one image in each of the images. Does that fit with your rules? I have to assume that if it hasn't been disqualified, that it does, because it's more than one image. So how does that one weigh? I'll leave that to you anyway. But yeah, it's a good little story. It's kind of, telling the story of distilling. Each image is kind of, a start and part of the journey of where it goes through. So it does come through in that way. I'll leave that one there for the minute. I use the word disappointment, but not in a negative way that's really bad. First two, Williamson Park. And then the third one doesn't appear to be. And I'm thinking, I get what you're coming from. It's about the colours, it's where we live. Completely get that. It works, tells its story. But then I'm thinking, that one should have either been Williamson View, or that one should have been something different from the other two. That doesn't mean it's bad. It was just how I was seeing it come through. And then it was like, oh, that's strange. It's a different viewpoint than the other two. So just something to think about when you're composing something that tells a story. There can be more than one story within what you're doing. As the whole thing's called colours, absolutely works. Lovely, gorgeous colours of sunset. I'm assuming it's a set. Because if I remember rightly, that would be the view across to where I live, I assume. I'm guessing, don't know it well enough yet. And obviously the whites and then obviously the summer. So the connection of the three there absolutely work. Be interesting to see how I score that with the Williamson Park connection, won't it? Okay. When the first image come up, I thought, oh, that looks similar to maybe the Camargue. And then sure enough, we come through and it is. Not normally an image we see of the Camargue. Everything we normally see is all about this one at the bottom. And it's all about not so much called Camargue in the competitions anymore. It's, you know, horses in the water rough, because the Camargue got a bit too popular, so they changed it. So when I first saw that one and kind of had that connection, obviously the rest of them then complete the story that the first one made for me. So it followed through completely. I think it works really well. We're kind of seeing them being obviously brought down to where the water is, the close up, and obviously the shot that everybody's sort of familiar with. Again, it works as the story. For me, I'm just wondering whether it's a debatable one for the conversion to monochrome, or whether you'd want the colours in that with that and make it a different impact. Sometimes the conversion to mono, obviously, the reason for taking the colours out is you get the connections and the stories. But I'm just wondering if the colours would present that differently than what we're seeing in mono. Again, I'm not going to mark it down because I want to see it in a mono just to see how it compares. I'm just offering something to see how it would look as a colour version. Okay. It's a small thing, I'm going to say. It's not the end of the world. It's not a big criticism or negative. Obviously, these two, you've got the, whatever they're called, I don't know whether they're called cars or carts or whatever their official name is. You've got those in those two images. And it'd be good to have one just hanging. So it completes the story with all three of them. I'm not saying it'd have been any better or any worse. I'm just saying I'd love to have seen that one just hanging from there. Again, I like the way you presented this with the landscape view this side, and then these two using that arch and completing that. Again, my weird viewpoint as I'm looking at this, I'm just thinking, what if you put that one at the top and then the arch completed? Again, I'm not saying you should, you shouldn't. Just the first thing I noticed was the way the arc was and whether it almost makes a circle. Almost, not quite. Whether it works or not, I don't know. Something to have a look at and think about. But certainly, I think if you'd have got that one in there, I think it would have lifted it a bit and just completed the story with the carts themselves. Okay? Do you want to do this one a break? Yeah.
Okay.
going to say a bit similar to the chaffinches, because it's kind of three birds. And while these are all different owls, so it's about the owls, there's a slightly different story about the way these ones work. I like the fact you've got an inside and outside looking in. In the ideal world for a triptych and a panel, you'd like that one looking a bit more straighter at you, but it's pretty close, isn't it? So I think that kind of works really well. Again, it's me being nitpicky. I'm not going to knock marks off for these sorts of comments. I'd have preferred it if this was the same size as those. Just jars a little for me with it being a different size. Really difficult to have done, whether you could or you couldn't. I'd love to have seen, because if you look across those two, the eye line's almost the same. It would have been really great if this one had just been at the same eye line. I think it would have really connected the three of them together. Again, they're just small things that I see as I look at things, and I think, wonder whether that would work, whether it makes it any different. But that's what you've presented, that's what we look at, that's what we mark, not marking what I think you might have done different with it. Okay? Absolutely works for me as a triptych telling a story. I'd be intrigued to kind of know how long it took you to get that one, whether it's yourself or somebody else and you were kind of setting it up. Again, whether it's done by triggers or really doesn't matter. I think it's the sort of way the gate works for each of them. You know, that's just about on the takeoff with the foot, and then at the other end, just the one working. Again, it's silly things, you know, it's not really about the images per se, it's about the story, but I might have tried to clone the orange bit out just as a bit of a distraction. It's not distracting from the story, but it's just one of those things. If you took it out, there's some possibles it could have some merit at a county level because it works as a sort of triptych. So I've seen a few similar-ish to it, but at that level they would absolutely murder it for that orange thing. So it's something to think about and maybe work with. Okay. Again, as I say, remember everything that, you know, it's my opinion. It doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean you should do it, doesn't mean I'm correct, you're the photographer, you presented. For some unbeknown reason, I want that end. It tells a better story for me with the way that you've worked with autumn. And I don't mind the portrait one in the middle. I think it works. I think the colours work. I think that one being the first and that one being the end would just be a stronger story for me. The story for me would then be that you've been out for a cold autumn day and you've now come back for hot chocolate to warm up from that sort of part of the day. So it does work. It's just my preference to put it the other way round. Okay. Again, I like the title. Quite often with autumn, everything we see and think about is the beautiful colours of the trees and reflections in water and all of that sort of thing. Very often it's not about what's sitting on the ground as we're trampling over it to get to our location for the landscape. I also like the flip of where you've got the black and then you kind of go on the white and the black with the birch on the end. I think that's quite a clever connection between the two. Now, that may not have been deliberate, may have just been something I'm seeing in the image, but for me, it looked like there was a deliberate connection between it. I like the use of the very faint key line just to separate them as well. I think that, again, works. And it's the sort of three different bits that also work for me. It's telling, I don't know the name of the tree that this stuff comes off on, they're just bits of stuff. But I kind of like the fact that it's three different elements. It's something that's very simple, but to me works very well. Okay. It's more of a personal note for me to start with. When this storm happened, we decided to go up the west coast, and it was really naff. What I should have done was come over to Morecambe. I love rough seas and things like this. I love being out and taking pictures, so I connect with that part of it, and the difficulty of being out in the conditions and trying to take the pictures. Does it work as a story for me though? And it sort of does, because I like that wave and I like that wave, and I know this is then sort of the aftermath of everything else on the prompt. But I'm not sure if I almost kind of want another picture with the railings and something else at that end as opposed to that as a whitewash. Again, maybe if that was in the middle and that was underneath. Again, it's just how I'm looking at it and sort of thinking about how I might have presented it if it was mine. But again, it has got a connection with the storm. It's everything about the storm. You would certainly know what that was about if that was presented to you. Okay. As each one originally went through, I'm kind of thinking, well, this is odd. They're all individually titled with colours, and I'm struggling to make the connection, particularly as the hand was the other way round. And then when you presented it as the three, it's now coming down in from the top. So there's kind of a lot of connection between what you were doing with the colours and then obviously rock, paper, scissors. And it tells its story. Does it really work with the colours for me though? And again, it's my personal preference. I get why you've done it. It's the three primary colours. It connects with everything we do with photography. So yeah, it probably does, although initially it was jarring with me the way they went through individually. So there's quite a lot of thought process gone into this as an image, because you've been thinking about the colours, the primary colours, and then also the connection with rock, paper, scissors. So while initially it's something you kind of think, oh, I'm not sure, you start to get the connection and think, actually, there's been a lot of thought put into this, the way it's been made and presented. So it fits the brief and works. Okay. I suppose my first disappointment is that you're inside. Shouldn't you have been outside in the weather but no, you decide to be a chicken, stay inside in the warm with your tea, your coffee, and watch everybody else. Interestingly, as a friend of mine does a thing called a 365 project, and he did a picture like this one day through a bus shelter, and he actually called this a special filter, a rain filter. So it made a connection for me with something else as well, with the way something worked. Again, I do get what you're doing with this, the way that you're using these two people and that one coming in, so it's creating that sort of balance as what you would do as a sort of style of a panel. The only thing for me is those two have got a similar colour palette with a blue, but then that one's got some quite autumnal oranges and yellows in it. So the three aren't quite gelling together. Yes, it's telling its story, but I'd like that one to have had a similar tone to these two, just to really connect all three together. Okay. Now, obviously, I was warned about that one at the beginning, because the three images is the same image. It couldn't do what it wanted to do. So, one of the things for me with that is it does, obviously, it's telling the story of some trees and their height. And I don't mean this to sound harsh, but for me, it lacks some of the imagination of some of the others. And I'm not trying to be nasty with that comment, because it's almost as though it was just a question of cutting an image into three sections to make the story. And it does work and tell a story of the height of the trees from the base going all the way up. So it does work. Again, the mono conversion is obviously taking the colour out, we're not distracted. So it does work. I wonder if it would work better though, if it came in and was more portrait to go with the way it's presented as well, then I think it would work better for me. Okay. There's a few people chuckling at the back, so I'm assuming it's potentially a selfie, or somebody knows who the person is, but Matt perhaps. I don't mind, I know I've said certain images where they're a bit offset don't always work. For me, I think that works with the ear being slightly offset. It kind of creates a bit of a story. I was expecting the third image to be nose as opposed to moustache, but then that may have been difficult to do. So I like the connection with how it's working. I do feel that image is a little bit soft, and again, it's starting to affect how the other two work, because it's not of the same quality. Okay. Again, good choice to work with how it's laid out. Again, similar to some of the other ones, yes, we've got 3 different butterflies, so it is telling some stories of the creatures and the animals. But again, it's for me, there's not a strong storyline in there as we got with some of the others. The way that sort of works at the top, those two at the bottom, again, it's a different way of presenting. Some of the others have been the other way around. I think it works from that purpose. I know it wouldn't have been possible because certain of these bugs like certain flowers. You've obviously got 2 on a purple, 1 on a yellow. Been nice if they're all the same colour. Not the end of the world, but they've just completed it with a similar colour tone. Okay. I'd be intrigued to know whether the skeleton's full size or whether it's about 3 centimetres. You know, it's one of those things you've got no way of knowing. I saw an image once that really looked like a huge derelict room, and somebody had set it up in a cardboard box about yo big. So you just got no way of knowing. When we spoke about the owls and uniformity, careful to make sure that the sort of 2 legs are almost in line along with the knees, and it just creates that absolute symmetry through the middle of it. You know, it's well thought out, well positioned. There's a bit of good fun about it, using a skeleton to represent it. I suppose for me, the really interesting bit, particularly with this one, you know, how did you get him to pose how you wanted to? Because he's got his hands over his ears. Good, some of you laughed. Oh, God. Wasn't sure that was going to go down. Okay. My initial thought for this was that you must have been fortunate or involved to be able to take pictures. As far as I'm aware, this sort of thing you wouldn't normally be allowed to sort of rock up and take pictures. So I think that's really, there's probably a strong connection between you and the event that's going on. Again, the choice of format and layout works really well. I think that's strong. Again, the only thing for me, this one particular image, this person on the end is kind of distracting from the scene, and it's not really completing the story. These 2 are really telling the strong part of the story. Okay. Three relatively simple, straightforward pictures. Nearly said a comment I shouldn't have done. They're fairly simple and straightforward, nothing really stand out about them. And that's kind of what you want, because if one of these really stood out, it would overpower the other 2. So they've all got a similar sort of colour palette going through them. They've all got a similar sort of exposure going through them. So not one is competing with the other one, which then makes you kind of look at each individual bit. And I suppose what its job is to get me interested in where that is. Because I'm kind of looking at that and thinking, well, that could be an interesting place to go, as does that. So it's worked as a story because it's made me think, I'd have to look at that and see if it was somewhere to go. So while it's not stunning award-winning photography, it doesn't have to be. It tells a story. Okay. I don't know if these are some figures somewhere in the landscape. I don't know how they've been created, but it makes no irrelevance. I think it's quite interesting that the scene's behind, and then you're using these people to sort of create that no people. There's a thing about it that's making me wonder where it is, what are they the same thing, are they different? Is it like a Gormley statues thing somewhere? So it's kind of working from that point of view because it's keeping me intrigued to try and understand and make a connection with them, because it's about the landscape with people, but they're not people, if that made sense-ish, sort of. Did to me anyway. Okay. Okay. I think quite brave to go silhouetted with this, and just leave it as this sort of stark, very white and very black, and no sort of other tone in between. I think that's quite brave to have done that. I don't know, I'm assuming that was the first one, I think, wasn't it? So I think it's something that is making that story from growth, potentially an image that took a while to get together. May have been that just happened to work within a 10-minute spell with everything there, I don't know. Again, for me, there's a little bit of symmetry. While this is all about the story of the growth of the plants, we've got some symmetry here, here and here that isn't all matching, and the way those sort of lines coming in, it's really difficult, I know, it's what you're looking at, but if you could have kept some symmetry with the way the structure that the plants are growing on, it would help the story much more and be a lot stronger for it. Okay. I was wondering what the third image was going to be, and I wonder if anybody else did as well. It does create a story, and its title is obviously very provocative. And certainly, for me, the first and the second, third image kind of really connect with the title of the whole triptych. The middle image for me, it was going to be really difficult to replicate the lighting of the top and bottom one because of what you're doing with the image, the middle section. It would be really difficult to get that sort of lovely shadow lighting off of the edges. I know you're using the white to sort of separate the three, but then that kind of interrupts with it as well. Again, it's only small details that I'm sort of thinking of that just break the story a little for me. I'm not sure how you could have done it any differently, don't get me wrong, because it's the right thing to have done what you've done. That's the hardest one to deal with within that set of creating what you wanted to create. Okay. Again, first one come up, second one come up, and I'm thinking, is the third one just going to be another one of wall art, and does it really tell us anything? And then the bottom one comes up, tells us exactly where it is, and then we've got the dog and we've got the bubbles in the picture as well. And I thought, absolutely tells me the story. Of course, you break the cardinal, so you've got a person in red in it. You all know you shouldn't put red people in images, don't you? I'm joking, it doesn't matter. I think it just, whether the person's in it or not, is irrelevant. But I like the fact that it made the connection between what the top two were. The fact that you titled it where it is, I now know when I go there, I can go and look for that street to go and find the same images and steal what you've done from your own pictures. Blatant plagiarism, you see. Okay. The lighting is the most powerful thing for me with this image. Very good control of your lighting and knowing exactly what you wanted to do with it, because it's the hands and the cross that you want me to look at, particularly here. The lighting where you managed to get it lit on both from such a distance shows somebody really understands and knows what they're doing. The choice to lay it out this way, to me, works. And we spoke about this during break. I think that would work fantastically in an exhibition where you can kind of put a bit of text and commentary about it and make an understanding. I'd love to say it'd make an excellent competition picture. I'm not sure it will. I'd love to see it going on to sort of a national, county and national circuit for competitions. I just don't know if those sorts of judges will get it and connect the same way. But as a story, really connects and works. Okay. Now that one kind of did me head in for a second. I do a lecture on the circuit, which is an opportunity for you to barrack a judge and have a go back at a judge. And I kind of do an exercise where I show a black and white image, but everybody thinks it's colour. And it's really, so when that came up in black and white, I went, I'm sure they were just in colour. I had to wonder if it was my own eyes adjusting to something. So it was interesting that you decided to show the individuals in colour and then present that way round. Really difficult subject is the shard. Loads of people have taken pictures of it, went up, and we always, the old story, go somewhere and find a different angle and find your own. Yeah, you can't always do that. That one takes a moment or two to find the shard, but it sits within this pane. Obviously, main image of the shard. And I'd like to think the last image was very deliberate on your part as the photographer by using that column and putting the shard coming out of the old bit of, I don't know whether it's Tower London or what it is, but I think that's quite clever how you've played around with that and use some of the old and the new to work with it. Again, conversion to mono, completely get it, understand it. I think the thing that's worked for you, particularly with these two, is probably on the same day, so the sky's a fairly similar tone, which really helps and keeps it gelled together. Okay. Now, Sonia's probably the one you want talking about this one, because she loves stairs and she's always taking pictures of stairs, and whether they're in shadow, not shadow, and all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, she'll probably tell me off later and say I should have said something different about this particular image. But again, for me, one of the things that works, I've spoken about where you've got different sizes of image, and they're not always necessarily the best thing to do. But for this one, the fact that you've gone smaller and smaller as it's gone through, I think works. And weirdly for me, and this might say more about me than it does about the photographer, I get the feeling I'm walking down steps for that, because it's got smaller and smaller. I know that's a spiral one and you go up and they're crisscrossy, but there's just something in my head that kind of says I'm going down steps. As I said, it says probably more about me and my brain than it does about anything else. Difficult one to do, because I do find that bit of the image distracting, but you can't not take it out and just focus on the stairs because it doesn't work with the rest of the image. So again, obviously for me with my weird brain, I think that works. Okay. Obviously after the third one came up, I was thinking, I wondered what the title was going to be for the set. And I can't know whether it was going to be done on a slightly different theme, but yeah, there's a bit of humour about that as well for me. We don't sometimes see enough humour in our photography, but for me that really works. One or two images I spoke about where we saw similar scenes, and I was talking about colour tones and palette. So that one, all three, very similar background, colour tone and palette, you haven't got one distracting with the other. So they're all you're then concentrating on is the individual birds within it. Again, you've done the right thing, pointed in, pointed to the centre. You're never going to want the middle one looking dead at you. It's not going to work. So, it's got to point one way or the other, and it's absolutely fine. Nice square images, everything about that works. In the ideal world, you'd love that branch to come down there, a straight one there, and then that one going up. But hey, you can't have everything, can you? And that's more of a, I'm not knocking it for that. It'd have been ideal if it could have worked. But hopefully you see what I mean about the background for that. It's very similar and blends in. That was the last one?
Yep.
Okay. Now, what I did ask if we could do was able to hold some back to try and create some tension. I am going to come back to the back and mark, but we're going to go through them one at a time because it's the easiest way to work with the software. Otherwise, it would have created a bit more tension. I did ask at the beginning about the scores, and I was told out of 20. I did ask if it meant 0 was the lowest score or 1. And I was told 0. Don't panic, there isn't a 0. It's just when a club says to me we mark out of 20, they never tell me what the lowest mark their expectations is, so I always ask if it's a 0 or 1. Okay, ready when you are. I'm going to start with a 20. That is so strong, and it just speaks volumes of exactly what its title is.
Kirsty Railton. Steve Worrell.
15.
Colin Yates.
17.
Ruth Lockery.
14. 16. 16.
Michael Day.
17. 13. 15.
Brad Duke.
12. 17.
Steve Lockery.
18.
Alan Phillips.
16.
Alan Phillips. Oops. Melissa, before.
16.
Caroline.
15. 16. 17.
Steve Weatherly.
'It's always fun because everybody's going, oh, I didn't like it because there was only 2 Williamson Parks. 18.
Ruth Lockray.
17.
Daniel Stark.
15.
Joe Carman.
19. 'Just imagine if the cup was the other side. 18. 19. 17. 18. 16. 15. 13. 14. 19.
Carol Weatherly.
16. 17. 16. 16. 18. 19.
Carol Weatherly.
20.
Greg Hadley.
17.
Colin Yates.
16. 18. Of the two, I've scored 20. This is really unusual. I've never had this sort of thing happen to you before. Are the two photographers in the audience?
Only one.
Only one. Which one?
Reg. Kirsty is the other one. She's not here tonight.
Okay, so which?
Kirsty is the one, anxiety.
Okay, so if I could, I would ask a question. So the last one was done by somebody who's here?
Yeah.
So how did you control the lighting? Because I'm intrigued, because it was great control of lighting.
It was flash, and it was very carefully directed,
Yeah.
and I had a very amenable model.
Yeah.
Who happens to be here as well.
Yeah. I think the way that as you played around with the setup of it.
I played around for ages to get the accent where I wanted it. It was always the cross.
Yeah.
But it's a very personal thing, you know. It's part of my life, so it's a very personal set of images.
And this might sound strange, but I knew that because there's a stamp of you about it, particularly the way that you've set it out across the three and the focus on the cross. So for me, there was a strong connection with how you come about it. So that one and the first one are both very powerful images and speak a lot about the photographer. I'm not suggesting that the first one, that the lady suffers from anxiety or any of that kind of incorrect political stuff. But again, there seemed to be something very personal about the two images. So thank you for your comments. Something else I'm going to quickly say before, because this is something I've been doing for myself. Quite often as a judge, we come along to your clubs and we talk about images and we profess to be saying you should be doing this and should be doing that and whatever. It's not how I work. I see it as a privilege to be invited to a club to come and talk about your images and assess your images. What it gives to me is I get to see a huge array of different images and I actually get to learn from looking at your images. It gives me ideas and it inspires me. So while I'm new to you guys and you've never seen me before, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me and allowing me to share your images with you. So from me, thank you.